first thing that we will try to do is to share some of the thoughts, thinking, main message, the striking comments, innovative comments that came out from the discussions. And in this case, I'd like to first welcome Urszula, who was moderating one of the groups. Urszula, if you can let us know what is the most striking, surprising, inspiring outcomes that emerged from the first round of discussions, which I recall were about what are the results expected, what should be proved in priority, when to rural proof, or which governance structure. So what are the 2-3 main striking points you would like to share?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Enrique. So just to make it clear that this is not an attempt to summarize the work that we did, because it's just not possible, but that I picked out a few things that really sounded, let's say, new to me, or that I was surprised to hear. First, in what you're expecting from as a result of rural proofing, I was really surprised to see how much rural proofing can be seen as a communication exercise in many ways. A communications exercise in the sense of raising awareness, making rural more visible, and just making people see rural areas in a different perspective. So that is something that I was really surprised to hear. And the second thing was when we came to think which policies should be rural proofed in priority, the range is enormous. That to me it's an indication of the huge need for policies to be adapted to the rural context, because basically we're talking about everything: how money is spent and how much money is going to the most hard to reach areas, as well as money's social policies, tax, whatever, name it, quality of life, health, education, safety, environment, everything. And even there was a suggestion that there should be a proofing of EU policies in their translation to the national level. So that again shows to what extent we have a feeling that rural areas have been until now invisible policies, and everything has to be actually addressed quite urgently to be dealt with. I don't know if this is this reflects, certainly doesn't give justice to all our discussion, but these were the few thoughts that I had from the morning session.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, can we add Patricia in this mini panel to report on the other group?
Yes. Highlighting also only some key points of a very rich conversation. Thank you all participants and presentations. Something similar actually to what you said, Urszula. How one of the expected things on what to expect about rural proofing is change perceptions about rural areas. So of course it's about to have more equitable, context-specific policies sensitive to the needs, but this change perception about rural areas came strong in the debate, and I think it aligns very much with what you were saying. Regarding what should be rural proofed, yes, equally there is a lot of things to be considered for funding, regulation, new legislation, but ultimately this is very context specific. It might change from one country to another. It really depends on sector, territory, and legal framework. So it's why it needs to be considered within each context. Time-wise, I think there was agreed that the sooner the better, ideally in the idea stage. But we were also discussing that perhaps not all the actors have the knowledge to be involved to do rural proofing from that ideation phase. So we also need to consider connected with the who should be involved also in the different stages. So the sooner the better, but then it needs to continue throughout the implementation, the evaluation, and it needs to be retroactive. So also to go back as a loop. And ultimately, for the governance, participants stress the need for cross-sector coordination, multi-level coordination, cooperation, clear structures. But I think that's something that keep coming and coming is the role of the rural proofers. Not just for as supporting and guidance, but something that needs to be permanent, that they need to be empowered to have a mandate, to have a permanent representations, to really be the anchors in the governance structure. And we have an interesting conversation about intersectionality within the local communities and how rural proofing needs to take into account not only the diversity in the rural areas, but also the diversity within rural areas, and to really consider when doing rural proofing that there are different type of populations that are affected differently by these policies. So really also to look at this intersectional approach when doing the rural proofing and be as inclusive as possible.
Very good. Thank you very much. From my group, I think we had similar messages, but if I could add on two. First, we came up as well with the point of rural proofers. As in our group, it came up as a kind of contact point in each public administration that has more knowledge about rural, or is the contact person that could participate in a wider network of rural proofers among the different public administrations, and that they can build capacities among each other, etc. But it's easier when you have a contact person, an appointed person within a public administration for that. And in our group, we focus a lot on what we define as well as the networking capital for the governance. For our group, it was essential to enable the participation of stakeholders. Not everybody needs to participate on every process, but at least you need to have the capital that would allow you to mobilize the right actors at the right time to be effective in the rural proofing. So reinforcing existing structures like national rural networks to make them work with a wider range of actors, not the traditionals from involving the common agricultural policy. The national rural parliaments perhaps also are important structures that could engage more and facilitate and alleviate a little bit the burden of this participatory part of things could help to connect on that. So, and of course, there was a very practical point because if we want civil society and rural society to engage, this requires time and investment from their side. So perhaps we need to consider some sort of specific resources to compensate as well for the participation, for the time that these people will take in participating in the governance structures. As my colleague said, this is not a comprehensive summary; it's just some key points. The summary will be done in the review. So these are striking points from the first session. But Urszula, what about the second session where we were dealing more with questions around data, around who should be involved? Again, very linked to governance or on the process itself. So what do you think would be 2 or 3 striking points?
Yeah, okay. We agreed on 2 points from each session, but as I see you have brought up more, I'm going to use 3 now. So the first one is in terms of who should be involved. We have, of course, the whole range. We did, of course, focus very much on local actors and different types of local actors, young, old, even immigrants and entrepreneurs and all that. The important point that we brought up is the involvement of local actors and also local action groups and which are very important intermediaries should be without putting too much burden on them. So their involvement it should be in a way that doesn't put too much burden on, or as you mentioned, Enrique, or there should be some way of compensating them or using their services to participate in the process. The second, and on how it should be organized, we had a very interesting concept. I would say that rural proofing should be mainstreamed in the same way as gender proofing, for example, that it should be something that is present in all policies in this kind of obligatory way. And ideally, there should be focal points in different ministries on different sectoral services. So it's a little bit like your idea of rural proofers.
Rural proofers, yes.
And the third and final point, which was quite an optimistic way to close our discussion, is that in view of the changes that are going to happen in the MFF, in the next period's financial framework, and all the requirements that member states will have to fulfill, including some kind of policy reform system that is required, maybe we will see rural proofing now from a different perspective. The rural proofing will be a tool that governments will want to use in order to improve to put in place their policy reforms, to make their policies more effective. So then we might see, strangely enough, as a result of the changes we're expecting in the next period, we might see more take-up of the rural proofing. Let's try and stick to this positive way of looking at things.
Let's be optimistic indeed. Patricia, any striking points you would like to add?
We have a similar reflection regarding governance, multi-actor, multi-level. In our case, we look at the example of the living labs with the science society policy, and again, putting the emphasis on the engagement of the local actors and the need to translate, not for the linguistic point of view, but also in how this is really supporting them and is useful for them to encourage. And again, as you said, the compensation that most of the time is unpaid for these rural proofers that are providing with the time. In terms of the how, the process, so a clear structure, of course, we heard like the different processes that wasn't clear on our, but also we had the opportunity to hear the experience of the OECD completely in the health sector, so a very strategic vision to implement this process. And it was mentioned there by Theodora from the WHO that even it is in the health sector, it's about an equity approach, so it's also indeed mainstream, and it's about territorial balance. And again, here the role of the rural proofers came out as key supporters throughout this process of how to implement. And that about data, the need for really mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative, to address the shortages, the importance of capitalizing on the territorial knowledge, because the standard indicators most of the time do not cover all, especially for the indirect expected effects of that rural proofing policies can't take. So really the need to leverage the territorial knowledge to be able to compensate the data gaps.
Okay, and final points from our group very quickly. I think we were a bit more practical than in Urszula's group. We thought that, yes, the interest of the different actors need to be represented, but to make it feasible and practicable, to make it happen and efficient, we need to work with intermediaries that represent the interest and that can connect with the let's say the actor at the bottom, and try to communicate as well the process and the input. We see it's a mix. We saw it is a mix of stakeholders that can bring the specific rural intelligence plus expert on the specific subject. It was very much well exemplified in the presentation of the territorial impact assessment when they have these territorial impact assessment workshops where they combine an interesting group, a relevant group, with the experts to work around the impact. Of course, we saw some risks around this because you really need to decide and be open to all the groups rather than design it and tailor it to your own political interest. But we saw that could be an efficient way of working. Another important point around the process, and I think it's a comment to reflect. Rural proofing is two things: as a process, is a policy process, a political process, but it's also a technical process. So how do you match the two? That's the balance that you need to find, and probably that's where we are finding all these difficulties in order to reconcile the political process with the more technical one. We don't have the solution yet, but probably this is something that needs to be tuned to the different context. But we see that this match. Important point. We had an example from Estonia, from research done in Estonia, and what that research shows is that there is a strong demand from local actors to have rural proofing. There is awareness among rural stakeholders about rural proofing, but there is a lack of implementation of rural proofing, or at least lack of awareness that rural proofing is being implemented. So the point on transparency when rural proofing is applied or not applied, it's also very, very important, probably linked with your point on communication. Important comment, we try to bring outcomes that could create a process that is, let's say, manageable and feasible and efficient at the same time. So an idea here was to link rural proofing within the policy evaluation cycle, not considering the ex post part, but yes, in the ex ante assessment that many policies have to run. Probably there has to be a component around rural proofing that that you embed rural proofing in existing processes. The other important aspect is investment in the networking capital. Again, to make the process easy, you have to strengthen, let's say, your connection between the authority, the political level, with the stakeholder community. And here we know there is a gap. There is a traditional networking done within a specific sectoral policy. The challenge is here to embrace and improve the networking and the connections as well with actors that traditionally did not engage in political debates around rural policies, like rural health, rural education, rural mobility, and there is endless sectors that we can discuss. Well, investing on that will make the rural proofing process easier. And again, here you have already existing structures in many countries, so perhaps you can continue investing and enlarge their functions. In terms of data, I think we didn't come with anything in addition. Again, the issue of not relying only on indicators, because we know information is missing and the granularity might not be the best one for many thematic issues. So we need to continue investing on that. Like following the example at EU, having some observatories that they talk to each other at different levels. So the rural observatory at EU level that can talk to the national rural observatories, trying to improve data there, and that this consistency it is done. And I think those were the most striking messages that I take.
We have three people representing three types of organizations. So we have first Stephanie van Opstal from the Flemish Land Agency, who represents, let's say, the public sector, the decision makers involved in rural proofing. And then we have Maria José Murciano from the Spanish Leader Network, who's representing civil society, but the network in Spain has actually done a lot of work about rural proofing to move it forward, and I think it's valuable to bring it forward. And also because we've been talking a lot about researchers and the role of research, we have Hilkka Vihinen from the National Resources Institute from Finland, who's also personally involved in some of the rural proofing work, to give us their key messages from all the discussion they heard today, and how they are taking up the work they're doing in their organizations to use those outcomes of this event. Maybe in the order that I mentioned you. So Stephanie, you go first if you're happy.
Yes, thank you, Urszula. Well, we are just starting our own rural pact in Flanders, so we're really at the beginning of creating a vision. But also last year we had our first data report about understanding our rural areas in numbers. And actually what I take from this session with a lot of information is that at the moment we are creating awareness about understanding the rural areas, but I believe that it's also, we have to take the opportunity to create awareness and explain the importance of rural proofing. Why is it necessary? Why we need to do that? Because we need to explain that towards other administrative policies, because at the moment we already got this rural proofing we talked about in our parliament, and just they have questions about the administrative burden, which impact will it be on other administrations. And I think it's the first thing that we have to do is the understanding, making rural proofing a positive concept towards other policies.
Okay, thank you very much. Maria José, what do
Hi
you
everyone.
take?
With your permission, I will put our rural lens on. And for now, then we will maintain them until everyone thinks about rural and the rural proofing comes a reality. And we have done a big campaign with the rural lens, and we gather a lot of rural proofers. And this is the best way to convince to the rural citizen, it doesn't matter who you are coming from a civil society, administration, private companies, you have to put your rural lens on. This is our main message. And regarding the intervention this morning, they are very brilliant and enriching the demonstration, the interest of the topic. For me, the most point to remark is still room for improvement. We need to interconnect all the policies. This is necessary. Convince to all departments that they are not convinced about this or thinking rural, and ensure territorial approach to policies, establish good instrument, as you said, can be local action group and leader, and start with the government, bottom up, and as Catalonia said, it's a bottom up approach, but convincing the governments is the beginning. In our network, we started in 2017 with a rural proofing campaign, and what we have achieved is baby steps. It's very difficult to move forward, it's not easy. Why we are doing this is because no one at national level is doing a campaign or introducing the rural proofing, the necessity of cross-cutting policies with the rural proofing. And what we have achieved now is we have grounded the concept, now it's understood even other scope than not only rural areas. It's very important to convince others, because we are totally convinced that the rural proofing is necessary. We have banished the urban-centric perspective, those who are formulating laws. We have made the citizen, the civil society, convinced and aware that they are rural proofers. And in a practical way, we put on our rural glasses wherever we go and evaluate all policies affecting the rural life. Firstly, we carry out a comparative showcases from Canada to Australia, consulted the rural citizens about surveys and excellent testimonies and big campaigns that we want to know the raising their voices, knowing what are the real needs, claiming for the needs, analyzing less approval laws, and I can say that they are widely defining the rural areas. It's very difficult for them to introduce the rural areas in the laws, as I said this morning in the broadcast sessions. We should take into account how the gender approach got the cross-cutting through all policies, And my solution should be, each time in all the document that the gender approach is done, /rural, and we will be sure that the rural is cross-cutting in all policies and all programs. Now we develop the last activity we have done is evaluation guides in 22 languages to rural proofing for the evaluation, rural perspective, policies, plan and strategy, and with a checklist to analyze. It doesn't matter who you are, you can analyze is this affecting or not how the rural areas or rural laws is affecting your areas. And as I said this morning también, we are running or conducting a study about the 17 areas in the 17 regions about evaluating the services in proximity, just to have some data about including healthcare, education, housing, and other services. But I will summarize, just say that only will is lacking. Only will. We have everything. We are totally convinced, but we have to convince the policymakers at European level, at national level, regional level, to do obligatory, and a dedicated budget is needed. So I can say.
Okay, many thanks, Maria José. We actually are very grateful to you for your concept of the rural lens or the rural glasses that you were using. I noticed in the chat that a very interesting comment from Marianne from Croatia, I think, that rural lens is actually easier to talk to the local people. It's a term that probably appeals better to when you talk to local people than using rural proofing. So we were wondering if you would like to bring those glasses to the conference in September, and then we can promote them somehow, like something. And you have also a very nice image from Carolina in the chat. Thank you very much. Okay, and then Hilkka, some comments from you, the key messages. We cannot hear you.
Such a wealth of information and experiences so far today. It's been great. At this point of the day, I have a need to take a kind of a helicopter view on what has been discussed. And I'm thinking about what the takeaway for political scientists would be out of this. Of course, there are many ways to approach it, but if we would start with simply saying that we are witnessing the need to make better policy. So there is there are some shortcomings that have been recognized, and there is a need to make better policy. And what we are also witnessing is that. Or we can frame rural proofing as a public policy innovation. That's what it is in terms of political or administrative science terms. And it's we can also connect it to policy coherence or policy incoherence, as the problem actually is. And that's, of course, very current for both the EU, but also for member states levels. And there we have discussed today both the vertical and horizontal policy incoherence, coherence aspects. So within different departments and sectoral policies, but also the need of rural proofing on the multi-governance level. So what kind of policy incoherencies are as a result, because we don't have enough, we don't take the rural aspects enough into account. What is interesting also from the political science point of view here would be to study the third dimension, not only the vertical and the horizontal, but also the time dimension. So how does this all evolve as a policy? how does it evolve in the EU? How does the election calendar affect it? And how the combination of the Council, Parliament, European Parliament, but also the member states, and then also the different administrative and political cultures of different member states and regions and so on. So this actually would be a great great topic for political science research. I hope one day we can maybe make a comparative study of all of this. But in practical terms, just to finalize, I think that we are all witnessing a change in administrative culture, because if we are really, as it seems that we will need more kind of more platforms for interdepartmental decision making, even not only consulting, as for example in Commission you have it in, but it's on a consultancy level, not decision making. But what would we need seriously in order to make this all work out? And I think that after all, rural proofing as a public policy innovation is not something very unique. There are many other processes going on that you may call belong to the whole of governance development, but indeed it has a lot to do with changes in the administrative culture. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for bringing up all these very different aspects, and I think that it combines very nicely and complements also what Jane said earlier. Thank you all very much. The last chance I give you to say is to think of one action, one practical thing you are planning to do, or your organization is planning or is thinking about doing or could do in the nearest future to move forward, to make rural proofing more concrete and to bring it closer. And I this time maybe start with Maria José, because you already said quite a lot about what your organization is doing, maybe, but if you still have something you can add.
Yes, for us the communication is really important. So we engage some influencers in social media. Some of them have 1 million followers to put the rural lens on, in order to engage not only rural people, but the urban people as well. So it's getting, increasing the number of followers of our network, and we are gathering each time more rural proofers to our network as well. More
Okay, great idea. I hope that fingers crossed that it works and that you really get a lot of followers to that. Stephanie?
Yes, in our Flemish Rural Pact, for the moment, we are also organizing like workshops of the future. And the things that we hear from the participants is the lack of a long-term strategy in administration, but also the regulatory frameworks that are contradictory to develop integrated solutions for the rural areas and for the countryside. So actually, we also see there is a demand for rural proofing, that it's really necessary. Just we are not doing it for the moment, but also our minister gave us an assignment for working and implementing the rural proofing. Also the importance of guidelines, but of course with the limit of additional administrative burden. So our first action that we really have to take is setting up like a first practical action, like a flagship around rural proofing, because for us it's also a learning process. and it has to go, for us, it still has to go slow. Like I said, first creating that stakeholders understands the rural proofing, why it's for, why it's necessary. We have to build that up, and then we can, during that time, we can create a framework that actually other administrations can also implement. So I think a pilot action for learning from ourselves is very necessary.
Hey, great. Well, best of luck.
Thank
I
you.
wish you very good progress in the future. And before I give the floor to Hilkka, I just want to give the challenge to everybody else in the room, to the whole audience. Think of having been inspired, I hope, by the different contributions to this event and by the discussion. What are the one action that you are planning to take, or your organization is planning to take as a result of this event, and that will move forward rural proofing in your context, in your country, in your region, in your organization that you work in? So think of that, put your ideas in the chat or raise your hand and share it after Hilkka, of course. I will have the time to give the floor to a few maybe small contributions if there are any. Sorry, Hilkka, and you go ahead now.
Yeah, no problem. Jane Atherton already mentioned that Finland is going to do the rural proofing with the Nature Restoration Act. Actually, in my institute, in Natural Resources Institute, Finland Luke. What's inspiring me, especially with this exercise, is that, of course, I'm quite used to using rural proofing as a tool, as a measure, but this is the very first time when I'm collaborating with many of my natural sciences colleagues inside Luke, so that we simultaneously try to assess the ecological, economic, the forest, waterway, and agriculture and game impacts of this act at the same time, and trying to make our intellectual horizons match as to this Restoration Act. It will be interesting to see how far we get and what we will learn out of this. I think it's it's a great thing to be able to collaborate in these rural proofing terms.
Okay, thanks a lot.